Well, thank you for joining us again. We're continuing to work our way through some of the songs of ascent, those psalms that were written to help the pilgrims make their journey to Jerusalem to worship. We're going to read two today together, Psalm 127 and Psalm 128. First of all, 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labour in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. And then 128. Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You will eat the fruit of your labour. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Yes, this will be the blessing for the man who fears the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. And may you live to see your children's children. Peace be on Israel. These two psalms, which some commentators suggest should be read together, remind us that we are dependent on God in the basic, ordinary areas of life. That God is interested in our daily life. He expects to be involved, to bless and to shape and to guide us as we go about our life. Perhaps the psalmist's journey was giving them time to reflect on their life, on how they were allowing God to be involved in the seemingly ordinary daily aspects of life. I wonder if we, in our time and age, have enough time to stop and reflect. I suggest for many of us there just isn't enough time for that. Perhaps we need to build some pilgrimage space into our busy lives. There are two stories of creative activity early in our scriptures. We have the Genesis 1:1, the beautiful picture of God, Father, Son and Spirit spending 6 days of fruitful, ordered, careful, harmonious activity, full of unity and purpose, creating a world to bless. Each day space to pause and look back and reflect on the day's activity. And then a 7th day of rest for recovery and enjoyment. There, in that story from Genesis, there's the model for us of creative activity. Together building something good in partnerships with space for reflection to see that what we've done adds space for Sabbath space and rest and recovery. The other picture we get from Genesis is a picture of humankind striving with their own agenda. In Genesis 11, we have the Tower of Babel. Come, let's build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we might make a name for ourselves. Here we see humankind trying to create something for their own ends, their own purposes, for their own egos. And the result of this striving is disharmony, a clash with creation's purposes, confusion and chaos. And so in these two psalms, the pilgrim challenges us on our attitudes. Are we following Genesis 1, God's way? Unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord watches over the city, we must walk in obedience. Or are we striving in our own strength? Are we spending our time and efforts in step with God's harmonious shalom desires for our lives? Or are we going it alone, striving to build our own empires, striving to achieve our own goals and aims? The psalmist, of course, is speaking to a Middle Eastern culture from thousands of years ago. Society was very much built around family groups. A sign of God's blessing was a large family. Many sons was not only a sign of God's blessing, but also meant better economic security. Most of life's effort and activity would have been focused on providing, building and sustaining the family group. So a sign that this was working were many children and living long enough to see grandchildren. Now we live in a different age and society, but the challenge from these psalms rings through the centuries for us. Whether we have paid employment, whether we're engaged in voluntary work, whether we're caring for loved ones in our home, whatever we spend our effort, time and money on, we need to be walking in step with God, working with him, looking out for his purposes, building his kingdom. Like the pilgrim brings their everyday hopes and dreams with them to Jerusalem and the temple, let us today bring our everyday hopes and dreams to God, and let us see and give thanks for God's abundant blessings. May we know God's blessing in our life this day and every day. Amen.